Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's rank the Uli Roth era Scorpions albums. It's interesting, I did not discover the Uli Roth era of the Scorpions till much later on. I was into Blackout and Love at First Sting. Those videos were all over MTV. And I did not even know that this era of the band existed until much later. And how I found out about them was I was always searching for guitar players that were like Randy Rhoads, that combined some classical elements with the blues playing. And I had discovered Richie Blackmore, who does that. And at the time, I was taking guitar lessons at a local music store, and not my teacher, but there was another guitar teacher there. And we used to talk about Randy Rhoads and stuff like that. And he played for me Sales of Charon, and I was just like, wow, this is exactly like the kind of thing that I'm into. I was also into Yngwie at that time. So when I heard that, that's what I heard was sort of that classical Yngwie Malmsteen using like different scales besides the blues scales, like Phrygian scales and stuff like that. And I just loved it. And it's time he had it on like a tape. He only had that song. It was like a tape somebody had made for him. And he told me it was Uli Roth. He didn't even tell me that it was the Scorpions. So it wasn't until years later I went and I tried to find Uli Roth recordings. And at that time, it was impossible and really hard to find any of his stuff. And I don't remember seeing these early Scorpions albums. At the time, I was buying cassettes. Maybe they weren't available on cassettes. Maybe they were available on vinyl. Maybe I just didn't realize what they were, because in my mind, I didn't even know that Uli was into Scorpions. I thought Sales of Charon was like Yngwie Malmsteen, Uli Roth. It was like a solo band. So I was always searching for Uli. So somewhere eventually I figured this out, and it wasn't cheap. I don't think it was till the CD age, maybe like the late early 90s, that I started picking up the early Scorpions stuff. And it's really interesting, because if you only know the Scorpions for Blackout and Love at First Sting and stuff like that, I wouldn't say this is a completely different band. It's not a case of like Phil Collins when they went sort of MTV and comparing that to early Peter Gabriel era Genesis, which are like two totally different bands. You do hear elements of where the Scorpions would go with sort of the big arena rock type stuff, but the 70s stuff is way more experimental. It's way more sort of bluesy and psychedelic at times. Uli Roth brings that element of melodicism and classical sound to his playing, but he's also very much a Hendrix worshiper, and you can really hear at times his Hendrix influence in a lot of these songs. So it's kind of interesting. The production on these albums, they're all roughly the same. They're not great. They're not super slick, but they're not bad either. They're maybe a little bit dated to the 70s. It really isn't until Uli leaves and they do Love Drive and Animal Magnetism, where Michael Schenker plays on an album, and then Matthias Jabs comes in, where they really start moving towards the Scorpions of Blackout and Love at First Sting and stuff like that. So there's four albums. There's four albums from the Uli era, but before Uli even gets into the band, they release this album, Lonesome Crow, which, as you can see on here, says featuring Michael Schenker of UFO, a very young Michael Schenker. And this is probably do a video on this album at some point, but it's a very even farther away from what they would become in the 80s. It's more of like sort of a psychedelic 60s almost sounding thing. And the other thing that's surprising is how early the Scorpions here are in the 70s, and how heavy some of this stuff is. And when people talk about like proto-metal and the bands that influenced metal and early founders of metal, they rightfully so say Black Sabbath and Deep Purple and Uriah Heep, Rainbow, UFO. And I think that the Scorpions are right in there too with the 70s albums. It's just that they never really broke big with these albums. There were never any really big hits off these records. So they kind of go unnoticed. And like I said, maybe people can comment on this, but like in the 80s, it seemed like I never saw these records anywhere. And again, maybe it was because I was buying cassettes or I don't know. I didn't see these till really when CDs started happening. This is where I was able to find these. So, okay, so the four Uli Roth era Scorpions albums, I'm going to go from my least favorite to my favorite. This is hard because I do like all these albums. And I do really love Uli's playing. It's kind of sad that he didn't continue with the Scorpions because I was racking my memory on this, and I think that I may have found an Uli solo album first before I got any of his stuff with the Scorpions, and his solo stuff is really hit or miss. And the particular one that I got, I don't even remember what it was. It was a very bluesy, Hendrixy kind of one. And I just remember being very disappointed in it. So this is a great mixture of like heavy rock, early heavy metal, and Uli's playing with the blues and the classical influence. I just think is great. So I do love all these albums. All right, but at number 4, my least favorite is, this is kind of surprising, but Virgin Killer for me is actually my least favorite from this era. As I went down these albums and I sort of went song by song, in my head, I had a different order before I sat down and started really thinking about the songs and going, yeah, you know what? Maybe this one isn't as good as this one, but there's still some great stuff on here. Pictured Life is a great, this is 1976, by the way. Pictured Life is a great melodic rocker, kind of foreshadowing what the Scorpions would become later on. Great guitar fills and runs and stuff. And also, Uli has an amazing guitar sound across all these albums. Just a good classic Hendrixy, loud Marshall through a Strat type of sound. Catch Your Train, another upbeat melodic rocker. In Your Park, moody ballad. Backstage Queen, another straight ahead rocker that's pretty fun. Virgin Killer, I like that one. It's a cool, hard rocking number. Unfortunately, this is something that plagues these albums, is that Uli sings on, I think, all the albums. He sings too much because I don't really like his voice. And Hellcat from this album is a good example of that. His vocals are just, they ruin that. I don't like the song. I don't like the feel. I don't like the main riff. And his vocals are just terrible. Polar Nights, awesome showcase for Uli. He's all over that one. So, all right, Virgin Killer comes in at number 4 for me. Number 3 is going to be, and this is probably what a lot of people would have put as their least favorite from this era, but I kind of like this album, Fly to the Rainbow. When I sat down and really started thinking about the songs on this, what a bizarre album cover, right? I just really like it. And it's a little bit more leaning more towards Lonesome Crow with this little bit of psychedelic 60s vibe to it. But I just dig it. And maybe it's because of the Hendrix influence in Uli. And this is the first album then with Uli. This is 1974. It also has Jürgen Rosenthal on drums. Speedy's Coming is a lot of fun. Hard driving, metal, early proto-metal type number. They Need a Million. I love this sort of classical Spanish guitar intro thing at the beginning of that. I think the Klaus Meine sounds really nice on that one. Drifting Sun is a pretty heavy, almost psych-like number. Unfortunately, the vocals are not very good on it. Fly People Fly, heavy bluesy. It's got this like sort of 6/8 bounce to it that I think is really cool. I really love the melody line in that one. The title track is just absolutely awesome. Fly to the Rainbow. It's very epic. It's got like a classical guitar like intro to it. The faster upbeat and the tempo change parts are really cool. And the outro on it has a very like Hendrix jamming type of vibe to it. So I've always just kind of liked the vibe and the feel of this one. And I just think there's a lot of great ones on it. So it ranks higher than Virgin Killer for me at number 3. All right, this was really hard, my number 2 and number 1. I could have flipped these two, and I kind of went back and forth. But for number 2, I went with In Trance. It's 1975. It's the first to feature Rudy Lenners on drums. This is before Herman the German, comes into the band. They had different drummers going on. But Dark Lady is a really cool, dark, sort of early proto-metal number that I really like, very driving. I love In Trance. I love that groove and the feel to it, like when the chorus comes in on that, fantastic. Life's Like a River, melodic, heavy ballad. There's kind of a formula with a lot of it. There's always like two or three kind of slower, ballady type numbers. I really like Life's Like a River. Top of the bill is a nice heavy kind of start stop main riff to it. I really like the chorus in that one. I think it's super catchy. Living and Dying is a mournful melodic lead playing on this another ballad. Robot Man is a lot of fun, and Evening Wind is a really nice ballad. Sun in My Hand is maybe kind of my least favorite on this. It's just a very sort of stock blues type of feel to it. It's very boring, and the vocals are very bad. Longing for Fire and Night Lights. Longing for Fire and Night Lights are the last two songs on the album, and they're a bit of a letdown. The album is maybe not the strongest ones on the album, but there's just some really strong songs on here. Okay, number one for me then is the only one left, which is 1977, and it's Taken by Force. Unfortunately, this is the boring album cover version. The one like the Graveyard one is way cooler. Steam Rock Fever is a lot of fun, big catchy chorus. I love the gang vocals in that. It sounds like there's a bunch of kids or something singing along with it. So it's just kind of weird. And that's the other thing about this era of the Scorpions. There's like just a lot of like strange things, sometimes combinations of things. And you can see them sort of reaching for what they would become with some of the big choruses and arena rock type stuff. And they're not quite there yet with a lot of this stuff. So you get a lot of just kind of strange things. And Steam Rock Fever is one of those, but it's still cool and it's fun and it's catchy. We'll Burn the Sky is fantastic. It's, in my opinion, probably the best ballad from the Uli era of the band. It's epic. It's melodic. It foreshadows for me the future Scorpions ballads that they would become, famous for. Still Loving You, one of the greatest ballads, Lighter in the Air ballads of the 80s. I've Got to Be Free, very Hendrix-inspired rocker. Riot of Our Time has an interesting, different kind of feel to it. And then there's Sails of Charon, which I mentioned, was that first thing that I heard. I just absolutely love that. The guitar in that is fantastic. It's so... if you want to hear where Yngwie gets a lot of his influence from, you can hear it in that song. The scales that he uses and everything. The vocals are super cool in it. It's just got an awesome feel, and the playing it is just fantastic. Love it. Your Light, very Hendrixy feel type rhythm in the verses, which I don't really care for, but the chorus is really killer. He's a Woman, She's a Man is super heavy, man. Very proto-metal, maybe the most metallic, most metal song from this era of the band. Really, really cool. Love it. Love sort of the intro riff, that stop-start thing, and the chugging verses in the chorus is just awesome. Born to Touch Your Feelings is a pretty cool ballad with a really bizarre name. That's also something the Scorpions will keep on doing, these sort of twisting the English language a little bit, but it's almost charming in some ways. You expect it from the Scorpions. Suspender Love. I actually really like this one. It's got a big arena rock drum beat and feel without the production values. They don't quite have the production yet of the big 80s, like the drum sound in the beginning. You could hear this. They had that 80s type of big drum sound. This song would have totally been an arena rock type number, but they don't quite have those production values yet, but it's still cool. I like the feel of it, and I really love the chorus. I think the chorus is super catchy. I love the way it kind of the riff drops down in the chorus, which I think is really cool. Most of the time, like, the riffs go up, but the chorus has sort of an elevating feel. Everything goes up, but this kind of drops back down, which I think is really cool. So, okay. That's my number one, Taken by Force. So let me know what you guys think of the Uli Roth era in general. When did you discover the Uli Roth era? How did you discover the Uli Roth era? What do you think of my ranking? How would you rank these four albums? I think I did a video on Fly to the Rainbow. I should have checked. I think I did. If I did, I know I've done some other like individual album discussions from this era. If I did, which I'm pretty sure I did, I'll leave a link below for you guys to check that out. All right, till we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.